Welcome to this edition of Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné in the headlines. Mahamat Idriss Déby says he will serve all Chadians after winning this week's presidential election. But top rival Succès Masra is contesting the result and says he's the winner. In Ivory Coast, Laurent Gbagbo's return is confirmed with his nomination by his party as a candidate for the 2025 presidential election. And breakdance will make its Olympic Games debut in the South, and the South African dancer is chasing her dream to compete in Paris. A large number of soldiers and police officers were deployed onto the streets of Chad's capital, N'Djamena, after military leader Mahamat Idriss Déby was declared the winner of the presidential elections. His top rival, Succès Masra, who is also Déby's prime minister, contests the results and is also claiming victory. Charlotte Hughes has more.
Scenes of celebration in the streets of Chad's capital. 3 years after he was proclaimed transitional president by the military, Mahamat Idriss Déby announced he had won the presidential election. According to the state's electoral commission, he garnered just over 61% of the vote, solidly above the 50% required to avoid a runoff.
In view of this sweeping victory, I am now the elected president of all Chadians. Not only the president of those who voted for me, but also the president of those who made other choices.
Shortly after the announcement, gunfire rang out in the capital. According to journalists on the ground, soldiers fired shots into the air out of joy and to discourage protesters after Prime Minister Succès Masra claimed he had won the vote earlier in the evening. Masra, Déby's main rival, made the announcement on social media not long before provisional results were due to be released.
The people's victory is resounding, and the victory is yours.
Masra urged his supporters to oppose what he described as a bid to steal the vote. The Electoral Commission said he won 18.53% of the vote in the election, which saw a turnout of nearly 76%. It comes after a tense election period marked in particular by the killing of Yaya Dillo, a prominent opposition figure, and the rejection of other opposition figures from the candidate list. Déby's win means that his family's 34-year rule will continue after he was installed by the military as the country's leader in 2021, when his father was killed in a gun battle.
And to Ivory Coast now, where Laurent Gbagbo has been officially nominated by his PPA-CI party as the candidate for the 2025 presidential election. Laurent Gbagbo, who spent 10 years in exile, is definitely back in the Ivorian political game. But his candidacy has already run into legal difficulties, as François Ferkataji explains.
This comes as no surprise, as Laurent Gbagbo had already announced his intention to run last March. But this time it's official. Laurent Gbagbo, the former Ivory Coast president, has been selected by the PPA-CI as the party's candidate for the 2025 presidential election, marking the launch of this pre-election campaign. A risky candidacy for the party, as Laurent Gbagbo is still ineligible. He was unable to vote in the last local elections. In 2018, he was sentenced in absentia to 20 years imprisonment in the so-called BCEAO robbery case. He was found guilty, along with 3 of his ministers, of ordering police officers to enter the bank to steal cash. Laurent Gbagbo has always maintained his innocence, and he has repeatedly denounced his conviction as politically motivated. He was pardoned, but not granted amnesty, so the loss of his civil rights is maintained. The PPA-CI now finds itself in this delicate position with an ineligible candidate. The former president's entourage promises that the party will fight to have this ineligibility lifted. If PPA-CI has chosen his candidate, the position of the ruling party is still unclear. Several RHDP executives have indicated that they would like the current president, Alassane Ouattara, to run for a 4th term, but the president has not made his intentions known. A choice that could create a new political crisis, as the case in 2020, the opposition believed that such a candidacy would be unconstitutional.
South Africa's top court started hearing an appeal against the decision to allow Zuma to contest this month's election. The electoral body originally barred the former president because of his conviction for contempt of court. But that ruling was overturned on appeal, and the Independent Electoral Commission took the case to the Constitutional Court. Jacob Zuma now heads the new party, Umkhonto Wesizwe, which is challenging the ruling African National Congress, which he once led. It might take a few days to reach a verdict. A new report published by various international organizations is painting a grim outlook for food security in West and Central Africa as the region moves into the lean season. That's the period between harvests from June until August. Nearly 52 million people across 17 countries are set to face crisis or even catastrophic levels of food insecurity during this window. Sam Bradpiece has more from Dakar.
According to this new study, the scale of the looming food and insecurity crisis across West and Central Africa will be unprecedented. Some 12% of the population across 14 countries analysed will face difficulties securing food and nutrition during the lean season. That amounts to more than 50 million people. The International Rescue Committee, one of the organisations behind the report, says the situation will be particularly bad in the Sahel, namely in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger.
There is a combination of factors that means the population is seriously affected. There are armed conflicts, there is exposure to climate change, there is also an economic crisis blighting these countries. In the three Central Sahelian countries alone, there are 7.5 million people affected by this food insecurity situation.
The IRC and other organisations are calling for urgent humanitarian interventions in the coming months to save lives. They're also calling on governments to facilitate access for humanitarian workers. But without major structural reforms, both regionally and internationally, to prevent and adapt to climate change, for example, it seems likely that crises like these will be repeated every year, if not worsen year on year.
The United Nations Civil Society held its 69th Global Conference in Nairobi. Over 2,000 participants to discuss issues of global concern in a two-day conference held under the theme of Shaping a Future of Global and Sustainable Progress. Our Nairobi correspondent Olivia spoke to the co-chair of the event, Carol Ozero-Angengo, and asked her what they were trying to achieve.
Civil society is very diverse, and we want to bring in the broad diversity of civil society into this space. So what are we planning for the 2 days? So we have got 3 sets of workshops, of about 50 workshops. Common issues are amongst financing for civil society, but also the reducing civil society space. How does civil society reorganize so that they are more visible, their role is more recognized, they're given access to more spaces to be able to bring the voice of the communities that they represent to the table. We have received confirmation that President William Ruto will be attending the high-level closing, and we hope that we will also put together a good set of recommendations that will have come out from these workshops.
So why do you think it's so important to organise events that bring together civil society organisations, government representatives and people from the private sector as well?
It is important because all these people you have named form society. Government holds responsibility to provide service and uphold the rights of its citizens. But the citizens also have a role to play, and citizens are spread out across civil society, academia, think tanks, private sector, etc. So if we work together, we will support government delivery on its commitments, but most importantly, we will hold government accountable. When we hold government accountable, that doesn't mean we have to be at loggerheads with government. We can picket, but we can bring our issues to the table, and we can inform government processes.
And do you think that it's significant that this conference is taking place in Nairobi?
Yes, it is significant. This is the first time that the conference has moved from the global north. It is the 69th edition. The conference has been held in the global north previously for 68 sessions. We cannot have it go back to the global north or stay in the global south for 68 years. We must ensure that there is equity, inclusivity, and we approach the future as equal partners. And so it is important that it is happening in Nairobi. It is in the global south, and we hope that we will represent the global south in a very clear, significant, and powerful way.
Thank you so much for being with us here today on France 24.
Thank you, Olivia.
The official breakdancing qualifiers for the Olympic Games are about to kick off. 80 breakers will battle it out for 14 Paris 2024 spots at the Olympic qualifier series to take place in Shanghai and Budapest. Clémence Valère takes a look at one of the women set to compete, and she might represent South Africa.
It's the final countdown before the international breakdance qualifiers for the Olympic Games. With only 14 spots up for grab and only 7 in the women's category, Courtney Paul from South Africa is determined to shine. The 32-year-old from Durban is just one of 7 African breakdancers, known as B-girls and B-boys, vying to make it to Paris.
To prepare for an event like this, like a Red Bull BC one or even an Olympic qualifier, touch wood, maybe Olympics one day, honestly, it's not an overnight thing. Breaking is not one of those dance styles where you wake up today and compete it tomorrow. It is something that takes a long time to understand certain movements.
Dancing was added to the Paris 2024 Olympic roster after enjoying wide success at the Summer Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires in 2018. For Courtney and her trainer Jaco Klaassen, every moment is spent training to perfect and fine-tune her skills and stamina before the qualifiers in Shanghai and Budapest.
And Courtney's strong, she's powerful. For a lady, she's explosive. She's amazing. But that stability, and then when we do these controlled movements, it's all about controlling the movement, to be aware, mind-muscle connection the whole time in the movement.
Between the 16th of May and the 23rd of June, the South African dancer will face off against 40 other women from around the world for a chance to compete on the world stage in July.
Very impressive. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Stay tuned for more news.